The story that I'm going to tell you is a mountain tale. It takes place in the days when people depended on horses. They were a part of daily life, as was death. The story's called Two White Horses. Seems like yesterday when it happened. I was just 5 years old, and my daddy had built me a bed in front of the fireplace. And that's where I slept. And that was my favorite place. And my mama used to pile great big heavy quilts on my bed. Those quilts were so heavy that sometimes I couldn't even turn over. And every morning, I would finally turn over and look toward the fireplace. And there was my mama, stirring in a great big pot of grits. And them grits smelled so good. I didn't realize till I was a grown woman that grits didn't have no smell. And I'd say, Mama, Mama, I want to get up. And my mama would say, well, get up, child. And I'd look at the floor, and I'd say, but Mama, that floor is cold. And my mama would say, I'll come and get you. And my mama would come over to my bed, and she'd pull that shawl out from around her, and she'd wrap it around me. And then we'd sit down in my mama's rocking chair. And she'd rock, and she'd talk to me. And sometimes she would sing, and sometimes she would brush my hair. But I remember waking up one morning and turning toward the fireplace. And there wasn't no fire in the fireplace. And I said, Mama, Mama. And my papa said, shh, hush, child. But I said, Papa, where's Mama? I want to get up. And my papa lifted me up on his lap. And he said, now, child, old Doc's a coming today. And I want you to go out on the porch. And I want you to show him how to get in. I said, but Papa, old Doc knows how to get in the house. And Papa said, now go ahead. And I got to thinking, old Doc used to give me candy. And he'd put his hand in his pocket, and he'd take out a piece of candy, and it'd be lint on it. But I'd pick that lint off of there, and it'd be good candy. And I went out on the porch, and I waited on Doc. And it was cold. And after a long time, I saw old Doc's buggy a-coming down the road, and I waved. And old Doc rode up to the gate. And he got down, and he tied up that mule. And I was waiting on my candy. But old Doc just walked right on past me and into the house. And I stood there in the cold. And I got kind of lonely. And then I heard something. I heard something in the house, something I had never heard before. And it sounded like, no, no, no. And I ran into the house, and there was my papa standing in the middle of the floor. And my sister Sally was sitting in Mama's chair, rocking. And she was crying. And I had never seen Sally cry before. And I said, Papa, what's wrong? And Papa never said. I noticed that the bedroom door was open. So I looked in, and I saw old Doc pulling the covers back over Mama. And I said, "Doc, is Mama cold? There ain't no fire in the fireplace. I'll bet you Mama's cold." But old Doc just shook his head. And I walked to the bed, and one of Mama's hands was on top of the cover. So I picked it up, and I put it to my face. And I said, "Mama's not cold. She's nice and warm. Mama, get up. Papa's gonna make a fire in the fireplace." And about that time, Papa picked me up, and he carried me into the kitchen, and he set me down in the corner in my chair, and he said, "Now you stay there and don't you move." But I said, "Papa, why?" And Papa never said. He just closed the door of Mama's room. And I saw my Papa take a pencil and a piece of paper, and he wrote something down, and he folded that paper, and he handed it to my brother Joseph, and he said, "Take this to Mr. John. He'll know what to do. Stay with him and help him." And I said, "Papa, can I go with Joseph?" And my Papa said, "You just sit there and don't move." And after a while, Miss Sarah came in, and she had bags and boxes, and she took them into my Mama's room, and she locked the door. And I waited, and then I heard a wagon coming down the road, and I ran to the window, and I looked out, and it was my brother Joseph and Mr. John on his wagon, and on the back of Mr. John's wagon, there was a box, a pine box. And I watched as Mr. John and my brother Joseph brought that box into the house. And they unlocked my Mama's door, and they carried that box into the room. And after a long time, they brought that box out. And my Papa put 2 chairs in front of the fireplace, and then they placed that box on top of those chairs. And then Miss Sarah came out, and she lifted me up on her lap, and she said to me, "Lord, child, what you gonna do now that you ain't got no mama?" And I said, "Miss Sarah, I got a mama." And then my Papa called Miss Sarah to the porch. And I was alone in the room with the box. So I picked up my chair, and I put it down in front of the box, and I stood on my chair, and I turned the nail on that box, and then I pushed the top of that box open. And I looked inside, and there was my Mama. And I said, "Mama, Mama." And my Mama was asleep. And she wore that pretty blue dress that she wore to church all the time with the white collar. And I said, "Mama." And about that time, my Papa came in, and he picked me up, and he said, "I told you to sit still." And he slammed the top of that box shut, and he turned the nail on that box. And the next morning, my sister Sally woke me up, shaking that old polka dot dress in my face. And she said, "Wake up, wake up. We gotta go to church." And I looked around for Mama's box, and it wasn't there. and I ran to the door. And there were all the folks that lived around us standing in the yard. And there was Mr. John's wagon. And there was Papa's 2 old white horses. And there was Mama's box. And then my Papa said, "Do you want to ride on the front with me or on the back?" And I said, "Papa, I want to ride beside Mama." And then I noticed a tear trickle down Papa's face. And he picked me up, and he put me up on the wagon beside Mama's box. And as we rode along, everybody was so quiet. But the sun was so warm. And when we got to the church, they took the box and they put it inside. And we walked in. And I don't know what happened, because I fell asleep on Papa's lap. And somebody woke me up, and it was my sister Sally. And she said, "Wake up. It's all over." And I said, "What's all over?" And I looked around for the box, but it wasn't there. And I knew it was on the wagon. So I ran to the wagon and I leaped on. But my Papa lifted me up and he said, "We're not gonna ride this time, child. We're gonna walk." And my Papa held my hand as we walked down the road behind the wagon. And when we got to the bridge that crossed over to the graveyard, them horses stopped. And Mr. John took the whip. And he beat them horses. And he said, "Get on. Go on there. Go on now." But them horses wouldn't move. So he took the whip and he handed it to my Papa. And he said, "Jim, them's your horses. You make 'em move." And my Papa took the whip and he beat them horses, and he beat 'em and he beat 'em. And I said, "Papa, don't beat them horses no more. They don't want to go." And they took the box and they carried it across the bridge. And we all walked slowly behind it. And we stopped at a big hole. And they put that box inside. And somebody handed me flowers. And they told me to drop them in. And I watched my Papa as he took a handful of dirt and dropped it in on top of Mama's box. And I said, "But Papa, we can't leave Mama here. It's muddy and it's dirty. We gotta bring Mama home." And Papa said, "No, child." And I must have cried all the way home. And that night, Papa had only one candle burning on the mantelpiece. And I saw him standing at the window, talking to himself. And I heard my Papa say, "Why ain't this night over? Why don't it just be over? There's something wrong out there. Something ain't natural." And we heard the hounds at the Huffman farm howling. "Oh, oh." And my Papa said, "Why don't they hush? Why don't they just stop?" And I watched as my Papa walked to the front door and listened. And there was that same old owl, the one that we would hear every night. But he he sounded strange. Ooh. Ooh. And I saw my papa put his hands over his ears. And I felt a little scared. And then I heard something else. Footsteps. Footsteps. Footsteps dragging across the porch. And the screen door opening. And Papa said, "Who's there?" And that's when we heard the voice. "Jim, Jim, open the door. Open the door." Papa said, "Go away. Go away from there." "Jim, it's me. Abby, open the door, Jim." Papa said, "I'll not open that door tonight." "Jim, I'm cold and I'm hurt something awful. Open the door." And I said, "Papa, Papa, that's Mama." And I leaped down from my bed and I ran over to the door and I lifted the latch and I opened the door and there was my Mama. And I said, "Mama, you've come home." But Mama's dress, it was all dirty. And it was muddy. And there was blood down the front. And as she held out her hands, I saw blood dripping from them. And my Mama didn't seem to see me. She just walked right on past me, walking toward Papa. And Papa said, Elby, go back. Go back to the grave." And Mama said, Jim, I'm alive. I've done come home." But Papa said, "Abby, how'd you get out of that grave? How'd you get out of that grave?" Mama said, "Jim, don't you understand? I wasn't dead. I must have been in a deep sleep. I could hear everything. I could feel one of my children holding onto my hand, but I couldn't move. And I heard that box slam shut. And I knowed when we was in the church. And I heard them when they nailed the top down on the box. And then I heard dirt falling in on the top of that box. And I thought, my God, am I gonna die like this? And after a long time, I heard digging and scraping, and I heard voices. And then I felt warm air on my face. And then I felt somebody tugging at my hands. They's trying to get my ring from my finger. But my hands were stiff and swollen. And when they couldn't get my ring off, they put cold steel to my hand and they cut off my finger. And the pain of it all made me sit up. And I scared them off. It was grave robbers. It was grave robbers. And I come home. And my papa knew that my mama was alive. And he put his arms around her. And he took her to the bed. And then my papa walked to the mantelpiece. And he lifted his shotgun. And he loaded it. And he said to Mama, "Did you see him?" And Mama said, "Yes, I saw him." And Papa said, "Name him." Mama said, "No. Don't you understand? Don't you understand? If it hadn't have been for them, I'd have never been able to come home." And my mama never told who the grave robbers were. They say there was no more grave robbing around here for a long time after that. My mama lived for 30 more years. And when she died, I had 7 doctors pronounce her dead. And when they buried her, I had the undertaker carve the shapes of them 2 white horses on a coffin. For you see, it was them horses that knew my mama wasn't dead and wouldn't cross the bridge with her box. They say animals know. And that's the end of that.